That fucking gutter rat actually showed up. Look, the gutter trash is still clinging on. Eleanor Lancaster's voice, a blade sharpened on generations of old money and contempt, sliced through the opulent air of the plaza's grand ballroom. 200 of New York's elite turned as one, their whispers a rising tide of schadenfreude. What would you do if the most important day of your life began with the whole world hearing you called a piece of trash? If you think that's brutal, stick around, because you haven't seen anything yet. And hey, if you're new here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is about to be the craziest thing you hear all year. At the altar, drowning in a sea of white roses and suffocating judgment, Ava Sterling stood impossibly still. Her spine was a column of steel, her gaze fixed on the man she was about to marry. A gaze so cold it could have frozen the sun. Julian, the groom, the golden son of the Lancaster dynasty, the man who should have been her shield, just stared at the floor. His jaw was a tight line of cowardice, a silent permission for his mother to publicly flay his bride, to strip her of her dignity before their entire world. A foster kid from the Bronx, daring to stand here. The audacity, the pathetic, beautiful audacity. The crowd held its breath, a collective vulture waiting for the kill. They expected tears. They anticipated a bowed head, a crumbling facade of shame. Instead, the corner of Ava's mouth curved upwards into a slow, deliberate, and utterly terrifying smile. It was a smile that promised retribution, a smile that sent a tremor of unease through the room, because no one, least of all the Lancasters, had any idea what kind of biblical storm she was about to unleash upon their gilded kingdom. What happens when the mouse in the maze turns out to be the one who designed it? They were about to find out. 8 months earlier, Ava had made the decision that set this entire, beautiful disaster in motion. She was standing in her real throne room, the corner office of Sterling Systems, a glass box suspended 70 floors above the glittering grid of Manhattan. The city sprawled below, a circuit board of power and ambition. Her city, her empire. An empire she had built from the ashes of a childhood the Lancasters couldn't even imagine. A black woman from the Bronx who taught herself to code in public libraries, now the invisible monarch of an AI logistics network that was the central nervous system for nearly all of North American commerce. The Lancaster Holdings acquisition proposal, Miss Sterling. David Mitchell, her CFO, and her oldest friend, placed the heavy folder on her obsidian desk. His reflection was a faint ghost in the polished surface. $1.2 billion over 10 years. Their entire real estate and shipping empire is hemorrhaging money. Their logistics are archaic. They need our platform to survive the next fiscal year. They're desperate. Ava's fingers traced the embossed Lancaster crest on the folder. Old money. The kind of family whose portraits were painted by famous artists and whose fortunes were built on the backs of forgotten people. They were a dinosaur, magnificent and doomed, and they didn't even know it. They have no idea who I am, do they, David? He shook his head, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. The shell corporations are ironclad. They think Sterling Systems is owned by a shadowy Zurich-based fund. They think they're dealing with some 80-year-old white guy named Gunther. That night, she'd gone to the Metropolitan Tech Gala. She went alone, wearing a simple, elegant black dress she'd bought for $90 at a department store. No jewelry, no entourage. For one night, she just wanted to be a face in the crowd, a woman unburdened by a net worth that could buy small countries. Julian Lancaster had been the one to literally stumble into her life, spilling a flute of cristal on her simple heels. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," he'd stammered, his blue eyes wide with a practiced, boyish panic. "Please, let me buy you new ones. Let me replace the whole outfit." Ava had laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. "They're $90 shoes," she said. "I think the champagne you just spilled on them cost more. I'll survive." He was beautiful, of course. He was carved from the same marble as Greek gods and magazine covers, tall, blonde, with a smile engineered to disarm. But that wasn't what got her. What caught her, what planted the tiny, treacherous seed of hope in her chest, was that he'd immediately knelt down, right there on the polished museum floor, and started dabbing at her shoes with his $1,000 silk pocket square. "I'm Julian," he'd said, looking up at her. He didn't offer a last name, assuming, like everyone else in his world, that she would just know. "Ava," she'd replied, offering no last name either. For 3 perfect, stolen months, their life was a fantasy. He never took her to the stuffy, Michelin-starred mausoleums his family frequented. Instead, it was hole-in-the-wall noodle shops in the village, late-night walks through a snow-dusted Central Park, and cheap beer at a dive bar in Brooklyn. He never once asked about her work. She told him she was a freelance logistics consultant, a vague and boring enough title that it deflected further questions. He never pressed. He seemed to love the idea that she was just normal. A woman completely removed from his world of predatory capitalism and inherited status. The fantasy shattered the moment his mother found out. A black girl from the Bronx? A foster child? Eleanor's voice had been a venomous hiss over the phone, a sound Ava could hear clearly from the other side of Julian's sprawling Park Avenue apartment. "Have you completely lost your mind, Julian?" "Mom, I love her." "Love?" The laugh that followed was the cruelest sound Ava had ever heard. It was brittle and sharp, like breaking glass. "Don't be a fool. She's a parasite, Julian. She can smell our money from 100 miles away. They always can." Ava had stood in the marble hallway, invisible, listening to her own character assassination. The unsigned Lancaster Holdings contract was sitting in her briefcase just a few feet away. A few taps on her phone, and their dynasty would have been a smoking crater. But she waited, because Julian, to his credit, had tried to fight back. "You don't know her, Mom. I know her type. No family, no connections, no breeding. She probably looks at you and sees a walking, talking trust fund. Get rid of her." The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it almost made Ava choke. Eleanor Lancaster, a woman whose own fortune had been secured by marrying a man 20 years her senior, was accusing her of being a gold digger. It was in that moment that Ava made a new decision. She would sign the contract. She would let them acquire her company, or so they thought. But she would stay silent about who she was. She would give them all the rope they needed, just to see if they would weave a ladder or a noose. The engagement was a whirlwind. Julian proposed after 6 months, a desperate, romantic gesture meant to prove his mother wrong. Ava said yes, watching as he slid a 2-carat diamond onto her finger. It was a modest, almost insulting ring by Lancaster standards. By hers, it was a microscopic speck of dust. The pre-wedding dinner was the first real battle. Eleanor's smile was a weaponized baring of teeth. "Ava, my dear, that's a fascinating dress. Is that from that little boutique? What's it called? Target?" "Yes," Ava had replied, her voice a placid lake. "It is." "How wonderfully practical," Eleanor purred, turning to her coven of society friends. "Ava is just so adept at living within her means. I find it admirable, a crucial skill for people from her background." Julian had remained silent, swirling the wine in his glass, his handsome face a mask of discomfort. And his silence was the loudest sound in the room. The wedding planning was a campaign of psychological warfare. Eleanor controlled everything. The plaza, a guest list of 200 people Ava had never met, and a prenuptial agreement so brutal it would have left her with nothing but the clothes on her back. Ava signed it all. She smiled through every humiliation, every backhanded compliment, every casual cruelty. Because locked away in the safe in her home office were the real documents. The ones showing Sterling Systems' quarterly profits of over $5 billion. The ones detailing the Lancaster contract, a deal that now held the very survival of their company in its ink. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "Phoenix Protocol is live. Awaiting your signal." Tomorrow was the wedding. The same day the first massive payment on the acquisition deal was due. The same day Ava Sterling would decide whether the Lancaster dynasty deserved to survive. Eleanor thought she was marrying her son to a nobody, a convenient plaything for a lifetime of casual cruelty. She had no idea she was about to be acquired. The wedding day dawned with the kind of perfect, sun-drenched Manhattan splendor that feels like a personal insult when your world is about to end. Ava stood in the bridal suite, a prisoner surrounded by Eleanor's hand-picked bridesmaids, a clique of women with cruel eyes and sharp smiles. They whispered behind perfectly manicured hands, their gazes dissecting her like a specimen under a microscope. "She's pretty, I'll give her that," one of them conceded, her voice dripping with condescension. "For her type." "Julian could have had anyone," another sighed. "Remember Astrid Vanderbilt? Her family practically owns Rhode Island. Eleanor must be dying inside." Ava's phone lit up. A message from David. "Board is demanding confirmation." "Phoenix launches in 2 hours." She typed back a single word. "Wait." The suite door slammed open, and Eleanor swept in like a hurricane in a Chanel suit, wearing diamonds that could have cleared the national debt of a small country. Her eyes raked over Ava, a flicker of something ugly and triumphant in their depths. "Well," the word was an acid drip, "don't you just look ambitious?" The bridesmaids tittered. Eleanor circled Ava like a predator. "That necklace, cubic zirconia, I presume? How resourceful of you." She reached out and touched a stray curl of Ava's hair. "Did you do this yourself? It shows." Ava's hands, resting on the vanity, remained perfectly steady. "Thank you for noticing, Eleanor." "Oh, I notice everything, dear." Eleanor's smile could have cut diamonds. "Like how you never speak of your family. No parents to walk you down the aisle, no siblings in the pews, just a few charity case friends from college." She paused, letting the cruelty hang in the air. "It was foster care, wasn't it?" The room went dead silent. Even the vicious bridesmaids looked down, feigning interest in their champagne flutes. "Yes," Ava said, her voice even. "How terribly difficult that must have been for you," Eleanor said, her voice oozing synthetic pity. "It explains so much. The hunger." She then produced a thick envelope from her purse. "I want to help you." Inside was a cashier's check. The amount was for $5 million. "Take it," Eleanor's voice turned to ice. "Leave, now, before the ceremony. Disappear. Julian will be heartbroken for a week, and then he'll recover. He always does." The bridesmaids gasped. iPhones materialized, ready to document the glorious final implosion of the Bronx gold digger. Ava looked at the check. $5 million. Eleanor's idea of a problem solver. It was less than the quarterly interest on Ava's personal checking account. "That's very generous of you, Eleanor," Ava said, her voice dangerously calm. A flicker of desperate hope in Eleanor's eyes. "So, you'll take it?" "No." The slap was a crack of thunder in the silent room. Eleanor's palm, heavy with rings, connected with Ava's cheek, snapping her head to the side. The sound echoed off the marble and glass. "You ungrateful little..." Eleanor caught herself, smoothing her suit jacket. She leaned in close, her breath hot and smelling of expensive perfume and hatred. "I tried to be kind. Remember that when you're left with nothing." She stormed out, her coterie of bridesmaids scurrying after her, their fingers already flying across their screens, broadcasting the story. The gold digger who refused $5 million. Too greedy for her own good. Ava slowly turned to the mirror. The red imprint of Eleanor's hand was already blooming on her cheek. It was a brand of their contempt. She touched it gently. Her phone buzzed. It was David again. 90 minutes, the board is threatening to pull the plug. Then, a text from Julian. Where are you? Mom said you're having second thoughts. Please don't do this. Second thoughts? Ava almost laughed. Oh, she was having them, but not the ones he imagined. She walked to the window. Below, the black cars were arriving in a steady stream, disgorging the city's elite. She recognized half of them, not as Julian's wedding guests, but as the CEOs who had tried and failed to acquire her company. The venture capitalists whose predatory terms she had rejected, the rivals whose unethical mergers she had personally blocked. They had no idea they were arriving for their own funeral. The ceremony was scheduled for high noon, the exact moment the Phoenix payment was due from Lancaster Holdings, $900 million that would either be their salvation or their ruin. The door opened again. It was Julian, his tuxedo perfect, his face a mess of panic. Ava, baby, thank God. Mom said you were upset. Whatever she offered you, just ignore it. She's just being her. I love you. That's all that matters. She slapped me, Julian. His face cycled through a series of emotions. Shock, a flash of anger, and then, sickeningly, a retreat into nothing. A placid sea of denial. She's just protective, Ava. You know how she is. It's been so hard on her since Dad died. The company, the pressure. She doesn't mean it. Every word was a nail hammered into a coffin he didn't even know he was building for himself. You're right, Ava said, her voice suddenly clear and calm. She doesn't mean it. He visibly relaxed, relief washing over his handsome features. He kissed her forehead. I knew you'd understand. You're so good, Emily, so patient with her. He glanced at his Rolex, a flash of gold and impatience. We should go. It's showtime in 20 minutes. The prenup is signed. The merger documents are all ready to go. He froze. Merger documents. I meant wedding documents. But it was too late. Ava had seen the truth in the frantic flicker of his eyes. The Lancaster-Sterling merger. They didn't just think they were getting a daughter-in-law. They thought they were acquiring her company as part of the deal. They thought so very, very wrong. 20 minutes, she repeated, her voice a soft, chilling promise. Perfect timing. The first notes of the wedding march began to swell from the ballroom below. 200 guests rose to their feet as Ava appeared at the grand entrance. She walked alone. No father to give her away. Eleanor had made sure everyone in the room knew why. Poor thing, a voice whispered from the pews. No family at all. Julian is practically performing a charity service. Every step down that long, flower-lined aisle was a gauntlet of judgment. Ava met their gazes, one by one. She saw the faces clearly now, not as strangers, but as components of a corrupt system. There was Richard Lancaster, Julian's uncle, who'd built his first fortune on predatory lending schemes in minority neighborhoods. There was Jennifer Ashford, whose retail empire was perpetually under investigation for wage theft. There was Thomas Mitchell, who'd changed his name to sound less ethnic and made millions by creating algorithms to deny insurance claims to the sick and the desperate. This was the Lancaster Circle, the untouchables, the monsters in tailored suits. At the altar, Julian offered a weak, nervous smile. Behind him, in the front row, Eleanor sat enthroned like a queen overseeing a public execution. The officiant began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Wait, Eleanor Lancaster stood up. The room went tense. This was not in the script. "I have something I'd like to say," she announced, walking to the altar, her designer heels clicking with chilling authority. "A few words about family and tradition." Ava's phone vibrated in the tiny pocket of her dress. 60 minutes until Phoenix deadline. "The Lancaster family," Eleanor began, her voice resonating with manufactured gravitas, "has standards. For generations, we have built an empire through careful alliances, through strategic partnerships." Her eyes locked on Ava. "Sometimes, of course, we must make exceptions for the heart." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. "But," Eleanor continued, her voice hardening, "exceptions require adjustments." She produced a document from her clutch. "As many of you know, Ava has graciously signed a prenuptial agreement. In the spirit of complete transparency, I feel our guests should be aware that she will receive precisely nothing should this marriage fail." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Even for this crowd, the public cruelty was breathtaking. "Furthermore," Eleanor went on, clearly enjoying herself, "any children from this union will carry the Lancaster name exclusively. Ms. Sterling's background will not be mentioned in any official family records." Ava heard Julian's sharp intake of breath. He hadn't known about that clause, but he said nothing. "Mom?" he whispered, a pathetic plea. "Not here." "Oh, but this is precisely the place, darling. Your bride believes in honesty, don't you, Ava?" Eleanor's smile was pure venom. "Why don't you tell our friends and family about your little consulting firm, the one that supposedly employs you?" The trap was set. Ava's cover story had always been intentionally flimsy. "I work in logistics," Ava said, her voice steady. "Yes, but where? Which company? What clients? My private investigators searched for months. They found nothing." Eleanor turned back to the audience, a performer playing to her crowd. "Nothing at all. It's almost as if you have no professional life whatsoever." "Mom, stop it!" Julian's voice cracked with strain. "I am protecting you," Eleanor snapped, before softening her tone for the guests. "A mother's duty is never done." Richard Lancaster stood. "Perhaps we should let them get married, Eleanor." "In a moment, Richard." She was not finished. "Ava, your dress. It's lovely. But I couldn't help but notice the tag when you were in the suite. It's a rental, isn't it? From that little charity shop on 5th. She was wrong, of course. Ava owned the couture gown. But the lie landed exactly as intended, painting Ava as a pathetic pretender. "There is no shame in poverty, my dear," Eleanor continued, dripping with false magnanimity. "But there is immense shame in deception, in pretending to be something you are not." The hypocrisy was a physical force in the room, so thick Ava could taste it. Her phone buzzed again. "David, 45 minutes. The system is armed and ready." Eleanor produced another sheaf of papers. "And one last thing. The merger documents between Lancaster Holdings and Sterling Systems, the very company you claim to work for, Ava. Funny how you never mentioned knowing their leadership." Julian's face went white. "It's my wedding gift to you, darling," Eleanor beamed at her son. "Once you are legally married, our family officially acquires Sterling Systems. Their mysterious CEO finally agreed to our terms. A transfer of $900 million is scheduled to take place in—" She theatrically checked her diamond-encrusted watch. 43 minutes. The room erupted. A billion-dollar deal announced at a wedding. It was the ultimate power move. Ava's phone lit up with a text from David. "They think the shell company is signing. They have no idea it's you. Your call, boss." "Okay, pause. Can we just talk about the absolute audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall of this woman? What would you do in Ava's shoes right now? Would you scream, cry, walk out? Let me know in the comments below because I need to know I'm not the only one whose blood is boiling. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You are not going to want to miss what happens next. So, you see, Eleanor said, addressing Ava directly now, her voice dripping with triumph. You are marrying into the family that just acquired your employer, which means if you even work there at all, which I sincerely doubt, you will now be working for us. Someone in the back laughed, a cruel, sharp bark of amusement. Then another. The room filled with it. Julian finally reached for Ava's hand, his own slick with sweat. It's just business, baby, he whispered. You understand, right? Did she understand? Oh, God. Perfectly. The officiant cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Shall we continue? Ava looked out at the sea of predatory smiles, at Eleanor's victorious, hate-filled face, at Julian's weak, pleading eyes. 41 minutes until their entire world ceased to exist. Yes, she said, her voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the room. Let's continue. The officiant's voice droned on, a meaningless litany of love and honor. Do you, Julian Lancaster, take Ava? A phone rang, then another, then a dozen more. Suddenly, half the room was looking down at their devices, faces contorting in confusion. Ava's own phone now showed 37 unread messages, all from David. She opened the most recent one. Wall Street Journal story is live. Your call. Eleanor noticed the disruption, her face tightening with annoyance. How utterly rude. People can't even find the decency to turn off their phones at a wedding anymore. Richard Lancaster shot to his feet, his face ashen. Eleanor, check your phone. Now. Don't be ridiculous, Richard. I'm in the middle of... Check your damn phone! The raw panic in his voice killed every last whisper. With a frustrated sigh, Eleanor pulled out her iPhone. Her expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to sheer, abject terror. This can't be right, she stammered. Carter Dynamics. The CEO is... No. The grand ballroom doors burst open. David Mitchell strode in, flanked by 3 stone-faced lawyers, his $1,000 shoes clicking a death march on the marble floor. He walked straight past the guests, past the groom, directly to Ava at the altar. And then he did something that caused 200 jaws to collectively drop. He bowed. Ms. Sterling, he said, his voice calm and clear. I apologize for this interruption, but the Phoenix Protocol requires your final voice authorization. The $900 million payment is due in 28 minutes. He held out an iPad. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the pressurized silence before a detonation. Julian's voice was a strangled whisper. Ms. Sterling? Ava took the iPad from David. The Lancaster Holdings logo filled the screen. And below it, their entire financial architecture was laid bare. Every loan, every over-leveraged asset, every fatal vulnerability she had spent months mapping. You know, Ava said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. Your mother was right about one thing. I did lie. She turned, a bride addressing her congregation of enemies. I told you I was a consultant. The truth is... She let the pause hang in the air, a moment of pure, delicious suspense. I own the company. Sterling Systems is mine. She held up her hands. I built it from nothing. Coded the first platforms with these 2 hands. The same hands your mother implied were only good for scrubbing her floors. Eleanor stumbled backwards. No, the CEO is... He's European, he's Swiss. The shell companies were mine, Ava said, scrolling casually through the iPad. 17 of them, actually. You performed your due diligence on all the wrong entities. Perhaps I should clarify the situation, Ms. Sterling. David stepped forward. Please do, David. His voice boomed through the ballroom, the voice of a herald proclaiming a new queen. Sterling Systems currently controls over 70% of all automated logistics in North America. We are the operational backbone for every major retailer, every shipping conglomerate, and— He paused for dramatic effect. For a significant number of the companies owned by the people in this very room, the frantic ringing of phones was now a deafening chorus. Panic was spreading like a contagion. Stock prices were plummeting. Emergency board meetings were being called via text. The Phoenix contract, David continued, was Lancaster Holdings' last and only chance to avoid catastrophic bankruptcy. They leveraged everything against this deal. Every property, every asset, even their personal holdings. Eleanor's legs gave out. Julian caught her, his face a blank mask of uncomprehending shock. They require our AI platform to modernize their supply chain. Without it, their entire enterprise collapses in less than 3 months, David said, checking his watch. The contract for that platform expires, unsigned, in 25 minutes. If it expires, Lancaster Holdings will face immediate margin calls on over $17 billion in loans. "You're lying!" Eleanor shrieked, finding her voice. "This is fraud! It's manipulation!" Ava held up her own phone. "Would you like me to project the emails? The ones where you referred to me as ghetto trash who should be grateful we're civilizing her?" A collective gasp swept the room. Or perhaps the text messages where Julian promised his fraternity brothers that marrying the clever little charity case would finally secure him the Sterling contract. She scrolled. Here it is. And I quote, "Mom thinks the gold digger's tiny company will make us rich. If only she knew." Julian went so pale he looked translucent. "Ava, I can explain. Or should we just skip to the merger documents?" Ava's voice was like ice. "The ones that illegally assume Sterling Systems is a subsidiary you can simply absorb? My legal team found 17 separate counts of contract fraud, misrepresentation, and conspiracy to commit industrial espionage." Jennifer Ashford stood up and practically ran for the exit. Thomas Mitchell was right behind her. The exodus had begun. "Stop!" Eleanor screamed. "This is my son's wedding." "No," Ava's voice cut through the chaos like a razor. "This is a hostile takeover, just like you wanted." Her phone showed 20 minutes remaining on the clock. "But I'm not as cruel as you, Eleanor. I don't destroy people for sport. So here is my offer." She tapped the iPad, and the massive screen behind the altar, the one Eleanor had installed to display wedding photos, flickered to life. On it, 2 options appeared in stark corporate font. "Option 1, Ava announced. "I sign the contract. Lancaster Holdings survives, but as a wholly owned subsidiary of Sterling Systems. You and your family retain a 30% stake. You will work for me." Eleanor's face was turning a shade of purple Ava had never seen before. "Never." "Option 2, Ava continued, her voice unchanged. "I let the clock run out. The contract expires. Lancaster Holdings declares bankruptcy before the markets open on Monday. You lose everything. The penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, the cars, the jet, the secret Swiss accounts." She smiled. "Yes, Eleanor. I know about those too." David handed Ava another document. "There is also the matter of the ongoing federal fraud investigation," he announced to the room. "The FBI has some very pointed questions about the last 15 years of your family's tax filings." Julian finally found his voice. A pathetic, broken sound. "Ava, please, I love you." "Do you?" Ava looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time all day. "Or do you love the idea of a grateful, silent woman who would never challenge you? A woman who would be forever indebted to you for saving her from the gutter?" She walked to the altar, her wedding dress no longer feeling like a costume, but like armor. "You had 8 months, Julian. 8 months to defend me. 8 months to stand up to her just once. 8 months to actually see me." Her voice cracked, just for a second, with the ghost of a pain she would never let them see again. "I gave you every single chance." 19 minutes. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Ava stood at the altar, the fate of an empire on the iPad in her hand. The timer ticked down. 17 minutes. "You want to know the whole truth?" Her voice filled the suddenly silent ballroom. She touched her phone, and every screen in the room, the wedding displays, the guests' phones, the news tickers on their watches, all lit up in unison. David's work was flawless. A presentation began. The first slide was a picture of a little girl with big, scared eyes, standing in front of a bleak brick building. Meet Ava Sterling, ward of the state, the Bronx. Images flashed across the screens. A teenager huddled in the corner of a public library teaching herself to code. Aged out of the system at 18. 0 assets, 0 family. A picture of a cluttered garage. Sterling Systems founded with $500 of saved cleaning money. The presentation accelerated. 1 client, then 10, then 1,000. Patents, awards. Magazine covers Eleanor had never seen because they were in tech journals, not society pages. The headline from Forbes flashed on the screen. "The Phantom of the Valley: How the Invisible Billionaire Behind Sterling Systems is Rewiring the World." "You want to know why I stayed invisible?" Ava asked, her voice quiet and dangerous. She looked directly at Eleanor. "Because I was tired of people like you. People who look at my skin color, hear where I'm from, and immediately assume I'm the help." Eleanor opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Your investigators were right about one thing," Ava said. "I don't exist in your world, so I built my own." She scrolled on her phone. "Would you like to see my actual net worth?" A number appeared on the screens. A number with a lot of zeros. $50 billion. The room didn't just gasp, it broke. A chair clattered to the floor as someone scrambled to their feet. Someone in the back fainted. Julian's knees buckled, and he sank to the floor. $50 billion? "Your family is worth $2 billion, Ava said calmly. "On a good day. With your current debt load, it's closer to $600 million. A rounding error." She walked down from the altar, the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. "But none of this is about money. It never was." She faced the room. "Should I tell them the real reason I'm here, Julian?" He was incapable of speech. 3 years ago, Lancaster Holdings executed a hostile takeover of a small, family-run logistics firm, drove them into bankruptcy. The company was called Mitchell Logistics. She gestured to David. "It was his father's company. 40 years of his life's work, destroyed by you." David stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. "They offered my father a partnership. Instead, they stole his contracts, buried him in legal fees he couldn't afford, and left him with nothing. He had a heart attack a week after he signed the bankruptcy papers. He died on the floor of the warehouse he had built with his own hands." "Business is brutal," Eleanor spat, finding her voice. "He should have had better lawyers." "Stronger?" Ava's laugh was a whip crack. "You mean like the 17 other small businesses you've systematically dismantled over the past decade?" "I have the list." She pulled up more documents on the main screen. Names and faces flashed by. The Martinez family, who lost their local restaurant chain. The Johnsons, whose construction company was bankrupted by a fraudulent lawsuit. The Patels, whose tech startup was bled dry after you stole their intellectual property. "You investigated us," Julian whispered from the floor, the realization dawning on his face. "For 8 months, Ava confirmed. every dinner where your mother insulted my intelligence, I was recording. Every racist joke your uncle told at the country club, it was documented. Every single crime your family has ever committed, it's all been filed. The timer on the screen showed 12 minutes. I did love you, Julian. I want you to know that part wasn't fake. Her voice softened for a fleeting moment. But you showed me who you really are. A coward. A weak, frightened boy who would rather let his mother humiliate the woman he claims to love than risk his own comfort. Ava, please. In 10 minutes, your family's name becomes a synonym for disgrace, unless you sign my terms. Eleanor, trembling with a rage so profound it was shaking her entire body, stepped forward. You manipulative little... Choose your next words with extreme care, Eleanor. Ava's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Because the FBI is listening to this conversation. Liv. She wasn't bluffing. David held up his phone, displaying an official notice of a federal investigation. Tax evasion, racketeering, conspiracy, that's a minimum of 15 years in a federal prison, for both of you. Julian grabbed his mother's arm, his face streaked with tears. Mom, stop, please, just stop. Or, Ava continued, you sign the contract. Lancaster Holdings becomes my subsidiary. You keep enough to live on, but you will work for me. You will follow my rules, and you will personally make amends to every single family you have destroyed. I would rather die, Eleanor hissed. No, you'd rather go to prison. There's a difference. Ava held up her phone. 9 minutes. The guests were stampeding for the doors now, abandoning the sinking ship. The mighty Lancaster Empire was collapsing in real time, at a wedding. Julian fell to his knees, right there, in his $1,000 tuxedo, in front of everyone. Ava, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Are you sorry you got caught, or are you sorry for what you did? Both, all of it. Please, Ava, don't do this. Ava looked down at him. This golden prince who had never faced a single consequence in his entire life, who had inherited his cruelty like a trust fund. Your apology means nothing to me. Your actions did. 8 minutes. Eleanor grabbed the iPad from Ava's hand. I'll sign it. God damn you to hell, I'll sign it. Mother, no! Richard shouted from the doorway. But she was already frantically scrolling, her hands shaking so badly she could barely focus. Eleanor's signature, a furious, jagged scrawl, appeared on the screen. Her hand trembled so violently that David had to reach out and steady the device. There, she spat, throwing the iPad back at Ava. You've won. Are you happy now? I haven't countersigned yet. Ava held the device, her eyes fixed on the timer. 5 minutes. 4. 3. Sign it, Eleanor screamed, her composure finally shattering into a million pieces. Julian was still on the floor, weeping. Please, Ava, I know I failed you. I failed you in every way a man can fail a woman, but please don't destroy my family because of my weakness. Ava looked at the few remaining guests, the ones too shocked or too implicated to flee. They watched, transfixed, like witnesses to a public hanging. You want to know something, Julian? She knelt beside him, her magnificent white dress pooling on the cold marble floor. I would have given it all away. Every billion. I would have signed your mother's prenup and lived in a one-bedroom apartment with you for the rest of my life, if you had just stood up for me. Once. I'll do better, he choked out. I swear to God, Ava, I'll be better. When your mother slapped me, you made excuses for her. When she called me ghetto trash, you told me she didn't mean it. When your uncle said I was surprisingly articulate for my type, you laughed along with him. Each word was a precision strike. Julian flinched with everyone. But the worst part, Ava stood up, towering over him, the very worst part is that you knew about the merger all along. You proposed to me to seal a business deal. Your love was just another hostile takeover. She turned her gaze to Eleanor. Like mother, like son. 2 minutes. Ava raised the iPad, her finger hovering over the signature line. But I am not you, she said, looking straight at Eleanor. I don't destroy people for sport. She signed the contract. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. However, Ava continued, I have made some modifications. Eleanor lunged for the iPad, but David blocked her path. Lancaster Holdings is now a subsidiary of Sterling Systems, Ava announced, but not for a 30% stake. She smiled, a cold, bright, beautiful smile. You get 10%. What? Eleanor shrieked. The other 20% has been placed in a trust to be distributed equally among the 17 families your company destroyed. The Mitchells, the Martinez family, the Johnsons, all of them. She pulled up the distribution chart on the main screen. They are now your majority shareholders. They are your new bosses. Eleanor's face was a kaleidoscope of rage and disbelief. You can't do that. I can, and I did. You signed the contract without reading the final amendments. That was careless of you. Ava scrolled through the document. Also, your salary, and Julian's, has been adjusted to minimum wage. You will earn your promotions like everyone else. This is illegal. No, Eleanor. This is justice. Ava slowly pulled the 2-carat diamond ring from her finger. It caught the light, a pathetic little spark, as she placed it on the altar. As for the wedding, she said, turning to leave, consider it cancelled. Julian scrambled to his feet, his face a mess of tears and snot. Ava, wait, we can work through this. No. The word was a slammed door, a finished chapter. You had 8 months to work through it, Julian. You had 8 months to be the man you pretended to be. She turned to address the last of the wedding guests. The reception has been paid for. Please enjoy the food. It's on the Lancaster tab. I suspect it will be there last. David handed her a leather folder. The press release is ready, Ms. Sterling. Ava read it aloud, her voice ringing through the ruined ballroom. Sterling Systems is pleased to announce the successful acquisition of Lancaster Holdings. As part of a new corporate responsibility initiative, controlling shares will be granted to previous victims of the company's predatory business practices. Eleanor and Julian Lancaster will be retained by the company and will undergo mandatory ethics training and community service. Community service? Julian's voice cracked. 5,000 hours each, Ava said, her smile widening. In the very communities your family helped to destroy. We'll start in the Bronx, my old neighborhood. Eleanor finally collapsed into a chair. The Queen, utterly dethroned. There's more, David announced. Ms. Sterling is also personally endowing the Phoenix Foundation with an initial $5 billion. The foundation's sole mission will be to support entrepreneurs and small businesses targeted by corporate predators. The flash of cameras was now incessant. The remaining guests were all recording. By tomorrow, the entire world would know this story. Ava walked towards the exit, her long white train trailing behind her like a victory banner. Wait! Julian ran after her, grabbing her arm. You loved me. You said you loved me. She stopped and turned, her eyes devoid of any lingering softness. I loved a man I invented in my head. That man, the one I thought you were, never actually existed. I can change, Ava. I can be that man. Maybe you can, she said. But not for me. You'll have to do it for yourself. She looked at him one last time, a stranger in a familiar suit. Your mother was wrong about everything except one thing. I was never, ever after your money. Then what were you after? He pleaded. Respect, she said. Love. A partnership of equals. Her voice echoed through the grand, empty ballroom. Things you can't buy. Things you never understood how to offer. she walked out, David at her side, and didn't look back. Behind her, the Lancaster Empire was a pile of smoldering rubble. Eleanor's final guttural scream of rage echoed through the plaza. "You've destroyed us!" As the elevator doors slid shut, Ava thought, "No, you destroyed yourselves." I just held up the mirror. The hostile takeover was complete. But the real work, rebuilding everything the Lancasters had burned down, was just beginning. 3 days later, the headquarters of Sterling Systems was a hive of controlled chaos. Ava stood in the main boardroom, 70 floors above Manhattan. Same view, different world. Seated around the massive conference table were not executives in suits, but the families the Lancasters had tried to erase. The Mitchells, the Martinezes, the Johnsons, the Patels. 17 families in all, their faces a mixture of disbelief, grief, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. "Welcome," Ava said, her voice soft. "To your company, Maria Martinez, a 63-year-old woman with hands calloused from years of cleaning office buildings after the Lancasters had bankrupted her restaurant empire, began to weep silently. I never thought I would see justice." "This isn't justice, Maria," Ava said, pulling up a presentation on the room's main screen. "Justice would be them losing everything the way you did. This is restoration." As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened. Eleanor and Julian Lancaster entered, escorted by 2 imposing security guards. They were both dressed in crisp, new Target uniforms, the same brand Eleanor had once mocked with such venom. "Meet your new employers," Ava announced. Julian's face was a hollow mask. 3 days of disgrace had aged him a decade. Eleanor looked shrunken, pathetic, her innate arrogance stripped away, leaving only brittle rage. "You cannot be serious," Eleanor spat. "I have never been more serious in my life," Ava replied. David Mitchell began distributing tablets to the families. "Your first assignment," Ava continued, looking at Eleanor and Julian, "will be janitorial duties at the new headquarters of Mitchell Logistics." The very building Lancaster Holdings had stolen from David's father. David's elderly mother, Sarah Mitchell, stood up, her small frame trembling with a righteous fury. "You killed my husband with your greed and your lies. From now on, you will start every day by polishing the memorial plaque we have installed in his name." Eleanor's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. "Here is your schedule," Ava said, clicking to the next slide. 5 a.m. to noon, janitorial work. 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., community service. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., mandatory ethics and financial literacy classes. "That's a 13-hour day," Julian protested weakly. "It's less than Maria worked after you took everything from her." Ava's voice was flat and hard. She worked 16-hour days at 2 different jobs to keep her children from starving. Maria stood up, her eyes flashing. "My daughter was accepted to Yale. We couldn't afford for her to go because of you." "The Phoenix Foundation has reinstated her scholarship," Ava announced. "A full ride for all 4 years. In fact, every child whose education was impacted by the crimes of Lancaster Holdings will receive full funding through college." The room erupted, not with cheers, but with the sound of quiet, cathartic weeping. It was the sound of broken things being made whole. "As for the assets of Lancaster Holdings," Ava continued, "they are being liquidated. The proceeds will be divided 3 ways. 1/3 goes directly to the families in this room. 1/3 will be used as the initial operating budget for your new cooperative enterprise. And the final 1/3 will go to the Phoenix Foundation to help others." "We'll starve," Eleanor whispered. "No," Ava said. "You will learn to budget." She slid 2 sets of keys across the table. "Your new apartment, 1 bedroom, 700 square feet, in the Bronx." Julian stared at the keys as if they were venomous snakes. Our penthouse was sold. Yes, Ava said with a thin smile. The proceeds were donated to the city's homeless shelters, specifically the ones your mother actively campaigned to have shut down. That was what broke her. Eleanor lunged across the table at Ava, her face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. "I will destroy you!" she screamed, as security guards easily restrained her. "I will tell every newspaper what you did to us." "Please do," Ava said calmly, holding up her phone. "The Wall Street Journal already ran the story this morning. I believe the headline was, 'The Bronx Phantom: How Ava Sterling Just Saved American Capitalism from Itself.'" She read a line from the article aloud. In a move being hailed as a new paradigm for corporate justice, Sterling Systems CEO Ava Sterling has transformed a predatory conglomerate into a force for restorative economics. "Our stock is up 40% since the announcement," David added with a grim smile. "It turns out investors have a real appetite for ethical leadership." Eleanor sagged in the guard's grip, defeated. "But I'm not a monster," Ava said. "Perform your duties well, and you can earn promotions. Real ones, based on merit, not bloodlines." "How long?" Julian's voice was a ghost. "The probationary period is 5 years," Ava said. "The average time it took for your victims to begin rebuilding their lives." She pushed 2 final contracts across the table. "Sign these, or the FBI prosecutes. The choice is yours." They signed. What choice did they have? The hours that followed were a masterclass in poetic justice. Margaret and Julian were driven to the gleaming glass tower that now housed Mitchell Logistics. They were handed mops, buckets, and cleaning supplies. "Start with the executive bathrooms," Sarah Mitchell instructed, her voice shaking but firm. Eleanor's hands, accustomed to silk and champagne glasses, fumbled with the coarse handle of the mop. I don't know how." "Then you will learn," Maria Martinez said, standing beside her. "The same way I had to learn after you took everything I had ever built." It was a cruel kind of poetry, but it was poetry nonetheless. Julian worked silently beside his mother, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Once, Ava, watching from the security monitors in her office, saw a tear fall from his eye and splash onto the marble floor he was mopping. She felt nothing. No pleasure, no satisfaction. Just a cold, clean sense of order being restored to the universe. "The press is asking for a statement," David said, entering her office. "Tell them this," Ava said, her eyes still on the monitor. "Power without accountability is just tyranny. The Lancasters ruled as tyrants. Now, they will learn to serve." That evening, their community service began. It was at the South Bronx Community Center, in the very room where a lonely, terrified teenage Ava had first taught herself to code on a donated, obsolete computer. "These are the Lancasters," Ava announced to the children and volunteers gathered there. "They will be serving your meals, cleaning your facilities, and tutoring you every evening." A young black girl, no older than 12, with bright, intelligent eyes, looked up at Eleanor. "You're the lady from the TV," she said, "the one who called neighborhoods like ours breeding grounds for parasites." Eleanor's face burned with a shame so profound it was almost painful to watch. "She will be teaching you computer skills," Ava said to the girl, "after she learns them herself." The girl laughed, a bright, beautiful sound. "I already know how to code," she said. "Maybe I can teach her." And she did. For the next 2 hours, a 12-year-old girl named Destiny patiently taught the disgraced matriarch Eleanor Lancaster the basics of HTML. The great reversal was complete. 6 months passed. They were lifetimes. Ava stood in her office, watching the sunset bleed gold and purple across the Manhattan skyline. Same view. Everything else was different. Her personal phone rang, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Hello? Ava." It was Julian. His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quiet, something humbled, something real. I just needed to say something. You have 2 minutes. I get it now, he said. What we did. What I let happen. He paused. Destiny? The little girl at the center? She showed me her project yesterday. She built an app that helps homeless kids find the nearest youth shelter with an open bed. She's 12, Ava. Ava waited, saying nothing. She's brilliant, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. More brilliant than I will ever be. And my mother would have written her off as nothing because of where she was born and the color of her skin, and I would have let her. His voice cracked. I was a monster. No, Julian, Ava corrected him. You were worse. You were a coward. Yes, he said. There was no argument, no defensiveness, just acceptance. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I did love you. I was just too weak to deserve you. I loved my comfort more than I loved you. The raw honesty of it was more painful than any of his previous lies. I know, Ava said softly. The families, he went on. Maria, Mrs. Mitchell, all of them. They treat us with more kindness than we have any right to expect. Maria brings my mother a bottle of water when she sees she's exhausted. Mr. Hadover, one of the men we ruined, is teaching me Mandarin during our lunch breaks. He let out a shaky breath. They are better people than we ever were. Yes, Ava said. They are. A long pause. My mother is changing too. It's slow, but yesterday she apologized to Maria. A real apology. She cried for an hour. Ava looked at the single photo on her desk. It wasn't of Julian. It was a picture of herself at 18, standing outside her last foster home with a single black trash bag containing all of her worldly possessions. The girl who had promised herself she would never be powerless again. Change is possible, Julian, she said, but not for us. I know, he whispered. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just grateful for the lesson. That lesson cost you everything you had. No, he said, and for the first time he sounded strong. It gave me the chance to finally earn something real. He paused. My mother and I have decided. When our 5 years are up, we're donating our remaining shares back to the Phoenix Foundation. Ava's hand tightened on the phone. Why? Because wealth we didn't earn is what poisoned us, he said. Maybe starting over, really over, is the only way to save our souls. After he hung up, Ava sat in the gathering twilight, alone but not lonely. David knocked on her door. The gala is starting, boss. The ballroom at the plaza, the same room where her wedding had died, was now filled with life. It was the first annual Phoenix Foundation gala. Maria Martinez stood at the podium, her daughter standing beside her, wearing a Yale sweatshirt. 6 months ago, I was a cleaner, Maria said, her voice ringing with strength. Tonight, I am the CEO of a company that is rebuilding my family's dream. My new restaurants will not just feed the rich, they will feed the hungry. One by one, the families stood and told their stories. The Mitchells had launched a new, more ethical logistics company. The Johnsons were restarting their construction firm, specializing in affordable housing. The Patels had just secured their first round of venture funding for their new tech firm. Phoenix after Phoenix, rising from the ashes of the Lancaster Empire. Ava didn't give a speech. She didn't need to. This was never about her. Later, she stood on the terrace, the glittering city spread out at her feet. David joined her, holding 2 glasses. Regrets? He asked softly. About Julian? He nodded. No, she said, taking a sip of water. My only regret is that it took me 8 months to see the truth. You gave him every chance, and he failed every test. Ava touched the bare spot on her finger where the ring used to be. Love isn't enough, she said, more to herself than to him. Not if it doesn't come with respect. So what happens next time? She smiled, a real, genuine smile. There won't be a next time. Not because I'm bitter, but because I'm finished. I'm whole. I don't need another person to validate my worth ever again. David raised his glass. To Ava Sterling, he said, who bought justice with nothing but patience and brilliance. And that's how you dismantle an empire built on lies and build a new one on a foundation of justice. What a story. If you found this as powerful as I did, make sure to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not up for debate. And please don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this. 1 year later, Ava Sterling stood at a podium before the United Nations General Assembly. Behind her, a simple slide read, "Corporate Accountability in the Digital Age." "Power corrupts," she began, her voice calm and clear, reaching every corner of the august chamber. "We have always known this. What we seem to have forgotten is that corruption is a disease, and diseases can have cures." The audience of world leaders, CEOs, and global changemakers leaned forward. 12 months ago, she said, I dismantled a dynasty, not with weapons or with armies, but with something far more powerful: transparency, with consequences. She clicked to the next slide. It showed 2 pictures. One was of Eleanor Lancaster, patiently teaching a classroom of kids in the Bronx how to code. The other showed Julian, hammer in hand, working on a Habitat for Humanity building site. They both looked tired. They both looked older. But they also looked more alive than they ever had in their designer clothes. The old rulers of that dynasty are now minimum wage employees, Ava said, but for the first time in their lives, they are also becoming human beings. She showed the final statistics. 17 family businesses restored. $500 million in predatory profits redistributed. 30 other predatory companies now under federal investigation because of the evidence she had uncovered. The Phoenix Foundation is not charity, she said. It is justice, with compound interest. During the Q&A, a reporter stood. Ms. Sterling, can you ever forgive the Lancasters? Ava paused. Forgiveness without accountability is just enabling, she said. They are earning their forgiveness. 1 cleaned toilet, 1 served meal, 1 honest day's work at a time. And what about love? Another reporter called out. You were supposed to marry Julian Lancaster. Love without respect is just ownership, Ava replied, her gaze sweeping the room. I was never going to be his partner. I was his acquisition. She allowed herself a small, sharp smile. So I acquired him instead. Laughter rippled through the assembly. But this is the most important part, she said, her voice rising with passion. Your worth is not determined by your family name, or your bank account, or the color of your skin, or by anyone who thinks they have the right to tell you that you don't deserve a seat at the table. Her voice grew stronger, a call to arms for everyone who had ever been told they were not enough. Build your own damn table, she said, and then change the goddamn rules. The standing ovation was thunderous. That night, alone in her hotel room, Ava looked at her schedule for the next day. 10 more companies to audit, 100 more families to restore, a world to change. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Destiny, the 12-year-old coder from the Bronx. My Shelter Finder app was just accepted to the Apple Store. Thank you for believing in me. Ava smiled. This was wealth. This was power. This was just the beginning. Remember, if anyone ever tries to diminish you, to make you feel small, they are only revealing their own weakness, not yours. Your value does not require their validation. Build your empire. Thanks for watching.